You can win the race and still feel lost. That truth has haunted me more years than I care to admit. I don't say it lightly. I say it as one who once lived as though life were a race, a long track lined with milestones, medals, and markers of worth. Childhood was the starting line. Adolescence was training camp. Adulthood became the sprint of deadlines, promotions, expectations, and obligations. The promise was always there. If I kept running, if I kept pace, if I kept pushing, one day I'd break the tape at the finish line and feel at last the satisfaction of having arrived. But I never did. Even in moments that should have felt triumphant, the acceptance letter, the job promotion, the family milestones, the sense of being late, behind, not quite enough, returned within days, sometimes hours. I would check my watch, glance at my peers, scroll through their achievements as though their lives were lap counters against which mine was always slower, always smaller. And the strangest part? There was never a finish line, there was never a referee blowing a whistle. There was never a rule book that said what on time even meant. The race existed only in my head, and yet it ruled me like law. I used to imagine that philosophy, those old voices about time, presence, mortality, were abstract luxuries, ideas to ponder when you had leisure. But now, in the quiet of these drives, I see they were pointing at something we keep missing, that the race we live by is not only exhausting, but imaginary. We're sprinting through days that were never meant to be measured in laps. We are living by clocks that tick in ways no soul can keep up with. And so I find myself here, whispering the question into the dim hum of the car. What if the race itself was never real? What if the pressure I've carried all my life, the tick of the dashboard clock, the blur of highway lights, the sweat on my collar as I rush to another meeting, what if all of it was built on nothing more than fear of mortality dressed up as progress? This is the contradiction I want to lay bare, not just for me, but for you too, because I suspect you've felt it, that constant anxiety of being late to your own life, that quiet shame that others are ahead while you are somehow behind, that restless, frantic urge to speed up, even when you don't know where you're going. I want to confess to you, I've been ruled by it. I chased deadlines and promotions and applause, and still I felt late to my own life. The car keeps rolling down this endless highway, but my mind circles back to the same haunting realization. I could run until the end and still miss the only road that mattered. The one beneath my feet, the one already here. The lie we've been told is simple, and it sounds so convincing that we barely stop to question it. Life is a race, and if you run hard enough, you will arrive. From childhood, we're given the script. You must finish school by this age, earn this title by that one, marry by this point, retire by another. Every stage becomes a checkpoint, every delay a humiliation, every step behind a confirmation of failure. Society calls it progress, parents call it pride, peers call it competition, but I call it the great theft, because it steals from us the only time we truly have now. The race promises certainty. It whispers, if you run hard enough, fast enough, far enough, you will be safe from regret, safe from irrelevance, safe from mortality itself. But the promise collapses the moment we touch it. Promotions pass and leave us hollow. Achievements fade into the ordinary within days. Even love, when treated as a milestone rather than a living presence, becomes just another box ticked off on the invisible race chart. I measured myself against classmates, colleagues, and friends. I scrolled endlessly through their milestones, their houses, their cars, their families, smiling back at me from glowing screens. And I told myself I was behind. I rushed meals until my own body forgot what it felt like to taste I answered emails at midnight just to feel I was catching up. I planned my next trip before I'd even returned from the last one. I lived by a clock that never stopped ticking, and in the process, I stopped living. The lie seduces us because it feels like purpose. Without the race, we fear we'll collapse into laziness, drift into irrelevance. But the truth is harder to admit. The race doesn't make us alive. It makes us frantic. It makes us restless. It makes us miss the very life we're supposedly running for. I remember the day I received a long-sought promotion. Everyone congratulated me. My family called. My colleagues clapped. For one evening, I felt the sweetness of victory, but by the next morning, dread had already returned. I was awake before dawn, staring at the ceiling, already fearing the next lap. That was the cost. That was the truth. I could win and still feel lost. The highway of this cultural race is cracked, broken, and yet most of us drive it anyway. And I drove it too long. My sting line is simple, but it hurts to say aloud. I wasted years running after a finish line that never existed. There's one memory I can't shake when I think about the lie of the race. It was the night I finally received the promotion I had been chasing for years. On the surface, it was everything I thought I wanted. There was a glass of champagne in my hand, flashes of cameras, the clapping of colleagues who barely knew me but wanted to share in the glow of success. My shirt collar was damp with sweat, not from the warmth of the room, but from the pressure of standing there, smiling, pretending that I had finally caught up to the life I'd been running after. For a few hours, it almost felt real, as though I had broken through the tape of a finish line that only I could see. But the next morning told me the truer story. I woke before the alarm, the room still dark, the ceiling faintly lit by the city outside. My phone was already buzzing with unread emails, demands arriving before I had even swung my legs off the bed. And into that silence came a question that slipped through my defenses before I could block it. Now what? That question undid me. I had crossed what was meant to be the finish line, but there was no finish. Just another lap, just another hill, just another breathless run into the same gnawing restlessness. Later that week, I went for a walk and ended up at the edge of a park where a marathon had just concluded. The runners were circling back to the starting line, medals dangling from tired necks, families cheering, bodies collapsing onto the grass in exhaustion. I stood at the fence and watched as they gathered where they had first begun. Hours of running, miles of sweat, and yet the race returned them to the same painted line on the road. The applause would fade, the streets would clear, life would go on exactly as before. That image branded itself into me, a track that leads back to its own beginning, a road that circles and never arrives. I could not escape the parallel. My life had become that same marathon, all the energy, all the striving, all the sprinting towards some invisible milestone. And when it was over, I was still the same man, standing at the same line, asking the same hollow question, now what? I carried that image into the car, into long night drives where the road stretched out in darkness. The dashboard clock ticked, the phone buzzed. The hum of the engine kept me company, but inside me, a different hum began to grow, one that whispered what I least wanted to admit. The race was never real. And yet admitting that truth was terrifying. If the race was never real, then what had I been doing with my life? What had I been chasing? What had I been sacrificing love, peace, and presence for? It felt easier to keep running, easier to stay breathless, easier to call it purpose, rather than face the possibility that I had been sprinting in circles. For years, that is exactly what I did. I ran until the cost was too great to ignore. The more I unravel it now, the more I see that the race was never about achievement. It was about fear. It was fear dressed up as ambition, fear disguised as progress. What was I afraid of? Being forgotten, being left behind, being irrelevant, dying before I had proven my worth. Because at its core, the idea of the finish line is nothing more than an attempt to bargain with mortality. If I can check enough boxes, climb enough ladders, and cross enough tape, then maybe death won't catch me. Maybe I'll matter enough to outlive it. But it was always a delusion. The harder I gripped, the faster life slipped. I thought time was a currency to be saved or a track to be conquered, but time was never mine to hold. It isn't earned or lost, it isn't won or wasted. It can only ever be inhabited, and the only way to inhabit it is presence. For too long, I believed slowing down was weakness, laziness, betrayal of everything I'd been taught about success. Now I see it differently. Slowing down is not failure, it is the only way to arrive. Hurry mistakes motion for meaning. Hurry insists that movement equals life, but it doesn't. Life is not measured in how quickly you reach the end, but in whether you are awake along the way. The race steals presence. Presence is the only progress. And yet, even as I say this, I can hear the old objections rise up inside me. If I stop running, won't I fall behind? If I step out of the race, won't I waste my life? But every time I sit with those questions, the same quiet reply returns. Behind what? Behind whom? There is no referee, no scoreboard, no actual finish line, only this breath, this road, this moment. The truth is harsher and more liberating than I expected. What I once thought was survival was only fear. What I once believed was purpose was only panic. What I once called progress was just another lap on the same empty track. And so the turn begins. The recognition that stepping away from the race isn't weakness, but courage. That the detour I resisted most, the refusal to run, is the only road that can actually lead me home. Some truths once seen can't be unseen. For me, the sharpest of them was this: the race was never real. I carried it for so long like it was law, like it was written into the structure of the universe itself. But now, when I look back at all those years of running, all the restless comparisons, all the shame of being behind, I can see it was nothing more than smoke. A script whispered into me by culture, fear, and the voices of others who were running just as frantically. The finish line I sought was always a mirage. Every milestone dissolved the moment I reached it, leaving only another lap to run. The only place I ever could have arrived was here, and yet here was the one place I kept sprinting past. The revelation came not in triumph, but in exhaustion. When I finally stopped running, when I finally let myself step out of the race, I realized I hadn't fallen behind at all. I had simply arrived where I already was. Presence is not delay. It is arrival. And the only finish line that matters is the one you cross when you actually wake up to the moment you are living. I share this not as a prescription, not as advice from a man who claims to have figured it out, but as a confession from someone who spent decades running blind. I cannot tell you to leave the race. I can only tell you what I discovered when I did. I found breath returning. I found meals that tasted again. I found conversations that lingered instead of being cut short. I found that the red light at a rainy intersection could be more alive than a lifetime of promotions, if only I was present to it. And so I want to hand this detour to you, not as a map, but as an invitation. What would it mean for you to step off the track, even just for a moment? Where in your life have you been sprinting without knowing why? What would it feel like to call the race what it is, an illusion, and to walk instead of run? I cannot answer those questions for you, but I can place them gently in your hands. I began with a confession. You can win the race and still feel lost. I end with a deeper truth. The race itself was never real. It was never the shape of life, only the shadow of fear. We have been running in circles, mistaking motion for meaning, measuring ourselves against clocks and milestones that were never ours to obey. But life does not wait at the finish line. It does not arrive with applause or medals or titles. Life is here, in the hum of the dashboard, in the silence between ticks of the clock, in the breath you are taking right now. So, step out of the race, step out of the frantic sprint toward nowhere. Let the tape fall, let the stopwatch break, let the comparisons dissolve. Walk your life instead. Walk slowly, steadily, with eyes open to what is already present. Walk knowing that presence is not delay, but the only true arrival. The race was never real, and the moment you stop running, the moment you let yourself inhabit this breath, this step, this road, you have already won. As the car keeps rolling, as the hum of the road carries us forward into the quiet, the race was never real. Step out of it. Walk your life instead. And in that walking, may you finally find yourself not behind, not ahead, but here.